He's a former Speaker of the House of Representatives, which made him third in line to the presidency when Bill Clinton was in the White House. A Capitol Hill staple, but Republican Newt Gingrich is not your typical politician. Not part, he says, of the Washington elite he fights against. He's a disruptor, a rebel. He's made a career of going against the grain, and he's now found a kindred spirit with the most unconventional candidate in U.S. presidential history.
I endorse Donald Trump. I'm going to work very hard for the Republican nominee.
He hasn't always been a supporter. In fact, he's been biting in his criticism.
Every time he talks about anyone else, it's clearly a mistake.
But he's now firmly on Team Trump. Was even a VP contender at one point, now a trusted campaign advisor. America needs change, he says, and Trump is the man to do it. I met with Newt Gingrich in Toronto. Mr. Speaker, you must know that a lot of people all around the world are puzzled, to say the least, about what's going on in your country in the presidential campaign. Not about who's going to win, but simply the kind of nature of the campaign that we've witnessed. In a couple of sentences, how do you explain it to them?
We're in a period of great turmoil, and we're wrestling with some very large questions. We are way beyond both the post-World War II era and the Cold War era, and I think we're trying to rethink our role in the world, and we're trying to rethink how we solve problems at home.
Well, those are big questions, obviously.
They're huge.
But there's also seems, though, to be kind of a bizarre nature to some of the campaign. Is that fair or unfair?
Well, I think it's probably fair, but I think, this is the United States. We do lots of bizarre things. We're a very wild and woolly country. We have a long tradition of people like Andrew Jackson, who was pretty wild in his own right. And we have a long tradition of an entrepreneurial approach that allows us to invent Google and Facebook and Uber and Amazon and you name it. And in a sense, what you're seeing applied to politics on the Republican side is that entrepreneurial tradition. Trump, in many ways, is closer to the people who created those companies than he is to a normal politician.
You see the data in terms of Americans who look at these two candidates, and they don't find either one of them acceptable or even capable of being president of the United States. Have you ever seen a situation like that before?
No, we've had periods when people were unhappy with both the candidates. It's not abnormal. Nixon and McGovern in '72 would have certainly fit that. Nixon, Humphrey, and Wallace in '68 would have fit that. So it's not, it's a little bit like consumers. They have pretty high taste, and they don't always get it met. But in the end, hopefully somebody will win, and we'll rally around whoever wins.
Somebody will win.
Somebody will win.
And rally around whoever that is.
Right. That's the last question was asked at the debate, and it was very important. If your opponent wins, will you support them?
You're not confident at this point in saying who that would be?
I think it'll probably be Trump, because I think the worldwide patterns in Austria and in Britain and in Iceland and in Italy, in Brazil, you're seeing a pattern growing of the people wanting change and the people being dissatisfied, and I think that pattern is hitting the U.S., and I think that is a huge advantage for Trump.
Let me throw some of your own words back at you.
Sure.
You're used to this kind of game, but this was only a month ago, and it was after the conventions. It was shortly after the whole controversy. Right. But you said this just last month. The current race is which of these two is the more unacceptable, because right now neither of them is acceptable. Now, clearly you've changed your mind since then. You think one is acceptable.
No, yeah, but that was not about how I felt. I was describing the public. I find Trump very acceptable.
You've always felt that way?
I've known him for a long time. I think he's a great entrepreneur. I think he'd be a remarkable change agent. I think he has idiosyncrasies, but they're not abnormal for somebody who's a strong entrepreneur. And I'd be comfortable with Donald Trump as president.
But you felt.
But I was commenting on something I would still say today. You have a race going on as to which of these two people is the less unacceptable, and the more unacceptable person is going to lose.
Well, when did he become acceptable to you as the candidate for presidency of your party, when he stands against some of the basic principles that you fought for and believe in?
Well, a lot of them are principles I think need to be rethought. I'll give you an example where I think he's shown enormous courage. We have been at war for at least 15 years if you date from 9/11, or we've been at war for 37 years if you date from the Iranian taking over the American embassy in 1979. We're not winning. We spent trillions of dollars, thousands of lives, tens of thousands of severely wounded. We're not winning. Now, in a healthy, rational country, you ought to take a deep breath and say, maybe we need to have a new discussion and really profoundly rethink what we're doing.
But is that new discussion pull out, get right out of anything outside your borders?
But he hasn't said that.
I didn't say he did, but I mean, what can a new discussion be?
Then why would you frame it that way?
Well, what could a new discussion...
No, why would you frame it that way?
Well, because that, to some people, is what it's either this or that.
He has never said that.
Right.
Except in the distortions of the elite media.
Okay, all right. So let's not get into the elite media argument yet. I'm happy to do that with you. But I want to try to...
But that's a key part of Trump's current reputation. The people take him out of context, they distort what he says, then they exaggerate the distortion, then they're horrified at what they've created. Donald Trump is an international businessman. He has businesses in Dubai, in Panama, in Scotland. He's married 2 European women. The idea that he's a xenophobic guy who wants to retreat from the world is silly. We are in 80 countries right now with military forces. We have training teams in another 40 countries. That's 120 out of the 200 countries that exist on the planet. Now, you could ask questions about, do you really need to be in 120 countries and not be an isolationist? I mean, my dad spent 27 years in the infantry. I spent time in France and in Germany as a dependent of the U.S. Army. I spent time in Brussels doing my PhD in European history. But I do think it's reasonable to rethink our role in the world, given that the world has changed. Right after World War II, we were 50% of the economy of the planet. Now we're not. After World War II, we had no economic competitor. China's a serious competitor. And you have to adjust to the reality of the time you're in.
But have you heard him make the argument the way you just made it there in the last minute?
Absolutely.
But the elite media is preventing that from being aired to the public? He didn't make that argument the other night in the debate.
He has said over and over again we need to rethink things. He said the other night that his steps had actually improved NATO. He didn't talk about withdrawing from NATO. He talked about getting NATO to focus on terrorism, and he talked about getting our allies to pay their fair share.
Right. NATO says that they'd already made that decision on that.
I'm sure they did. I'm sure there's no circumstance where NATO would ever concede they'd done something because of Donald Trump. But when we carry 72% of the burden for 28 countries, it's not illegitimate to say the other guys could do a little more.
All right, but that's not the only issue out there, and it's certainly not the only issue that Americans are looking at. Right. The immigration question,
right? The
trade question, as it impacts the economy.
Okay. So let's take those two.
Okay. Well, let's take those two because his initial statement on immigration, as far as it was in terms of Muslims, wasn't misinterpreted by the media. He said it plain out.
Right. He would have a
ban on Muslim immigration.
He would have a halt.
Right.
Okay. And he has since modified it to say he would halt until you can vet people coming from places that are dangerous. Which, in a sense, I would say, why wouldn't that make sense?
But why did he say what he said at the beginning and stuck with it for a long time through the primaries? It wasn't until near the end of the primaries or past the primaries that he started to modify.
I think initially he did not understand some of the implications of it. And look, he is a businessman. Hillary Clinton has been active in politics for 46 years. So if what you think you need is experience at doing what's failing, she is a terrific candidate. He's a brand new player. He's been active for a little over a year. He's going to make mistakes. The question is, would you rather have the risk of a change agent who will occasionally make mistakes, or a very veteran participant in failure who will continue the policies of failure?
But isn't it a rather major mistake to not understand what a full ban on Muslim immigration would mean? I mean, do you not think these things through before you say them? You would think that through before you said it, no?
But I'm in a different position than he is. He is in the process of evolving, which he has to be, because he's never done this stuff before. And the American public so far is saying, we may need a change agent more than we need an experienced manager of failure.
Let me try the trade one on you.
Sure.
Okay. It's another quote of yours. We got to go back a ways for this. This was 1993.
Right.
All right. This is you speaking on Capitol Hill. Member after member would come up and say, I really believe this is a historic vote.
I want to be on the right side. I can't tell you the number of members who said to me, I would feel terrible telling my grandchildren. I turned my back and walked away from Mexico, and I walked away from my country's future.
That's right.
Talking about NAFTA.
Yes, in 1993, as the Republican whip, I got more votes for NAFTA than Gore and Clinton combined in the U.S. House. And I would say to you that we should look at it very carefully, and we should think through how it's worked. Far too many, the balance of trade has been far too much in Mexico's advantage. The number of American companies have gone to Mexico. I mean, the recent announcement by Ford, they're going to move all of their small car division to Mexico.
And move their large car division into Michigan. No jobs would be lost. More, in fact, would be created. That's what they say.
That's what they say.
That's not what...
You can go to town after town. Well, that isn't quite what happens.
Well, they just opened a new plant for 2,000 new employees.
But I'm just telling you, I think the general feeling in the United States is that on trade, we have run an $800 billion deficit annually. You can't sustain that. We're told by the Director of National Intelligence that the Chinese last year stole $360 billion in intellectual property. Now, why would you call that free trade? That's theft. So I'm very prepared to review all of that stuff.
Now, he wants to go beyond reviewing. I mean, he tells his audiences he's going to rip it up. NAFTA.
He will force a renegotiation.
Born out of conversations between Ronald Reagan and Brian Mulroney initially for North America, or for U.S.-Canada free trade, then to NAFTA, including Mexico in '93, and you sign it. Rip it up.
Originally talked about by Ronald Reagan in 1979.
Right.
That's 37 years ago.
You're talking about their future here. They're your grandchildren's future.
Right, and what I'm saying is it's reasonable to reassess these things in the context of where we are right now. And I think that that's a very important part of what we should be doing. The United States cannot continue to have an open policy that leads us to an $800 billion a year trade deficit. It is not sustainable in the long run. And we need to rethink it from the ground up.
What are countries like Canada supposed to think when you say that? And I mean, listen, you're not there to govern for Canada. You're there to govern for the United States. But it's an enormous partnership between the two. Both sides gave up a lot to get a deal. And now you have an American leadership saying, review it or tear it up and get rid of it.
I think replace it would be more accurate than get rid of it. But, for example, I think Trump is going to work very hard to get a business transfer tax to replace the corporate income tax, which will allow us to charge incoming products probably 16 or 17%, and to rebate for our exports the same. The Europeans have been doing this now since the 1940s. So we have had an obsolete tax system which doesn't allow us to rebate our exports and doesn't allow us to charge imports, while we're competing with countries like Germany, that every Mercedes that's shipped out, they get a nice check from the government rebating their taxes.
You make it sound like Donald Trump is a very reasonable, smart business person with new ideas and wanting to re-examine things. How do you deal with that kind of other side of Donald Trump, like the side that was up at 3:30 this morning?
I think it's very foolish.
But I mean, isn't that what people look at and say, you know, I'm looking for a president of the United States. This guy's up tweeting about sex tapes at 3:30 in the morning.
Trump is occasionally foolish in his tweets. Clinton is routinely foolish in lying.
They both seem to be stretching the truth at times.
No,
you got to admit
beyond stretching the truth.
But both of them.
Hillary Clinton routinely lies on a scale that I can't remember any presidential candidate trying.
Newspapers are fact-checking both of them, and they absolutely see the lies on both sides.
Come on. 33,000 emails deleted, the servers, the FBI in the tank. I mean, the whole notion of the way that this thing has been...
The FBI in the tank.
It's an you look at Comey's testimony and it makes you want to cry. If Comey had been the director of the FBI in 1973, Watergate would not have occurred and Nixon would have served out his term.
But Comey gave you some of the best lines you've had in the campaign.
That's right, and he didn't, and he failed to indict when it is obvious that the law was broken. Trump
wins, Comey's gone?
Well, I don't know what the legalities are for the length of time the FBI director serves, but I think Comey has a lot to answer for. I think this has been a terrible performance that undermines the reputation of the FBI.
Well, let's go back to the 3:30 a.m. tweets.
I think it's foolish of him to look.
Have you told him? Have you picked up the phone and said, "Are you crazy?"
Not about this, but I've told him before. He ought to quit tweeting. She ought to quit lying. I think of the choice.
So what does he say? I'll stop tweeting when she stops lying?
No. Occasionally he says he'll stop tweeting that. But my point is, of the two offenses, while I find that irritating, I find her corruption and her dishonesty frightening.
But irritating. This has been 4 or 5 days since this issue came up about this Miss Universe.
He should have dropped it the first night.
But now they're talking, and there are those in his campaign or close to him, Rudy Giuliani, saying, go after the Lewinsky issue.
I think, look, my personal belief, and I've said this publicly, I've written a newsletter on it, the bigger the campaign choice, the better off Trump is. If the choice is raising taxes, lowering taxes, he'll win. If the choice is continuing our trade policy, rethink our trade policy, he'll win. If the choice is the current failed foreign policy, a brand new foreign policy, he'll win. To get down in the gutter with the Clintons is a guaranteed way to be in trouble because they are better at mud fighting than anybody in American politics.
Is he in the gutter right now?
Well, I think he and she are both at a level that makes no sense. But it makes more sense for her because she can't win a big issues campaign. But she might win if she focuses on discrediting Trump.
You were good friends with Bill Clinton. I mean, you were opponents, and yet you had a relationship.
We were friendly, sure.
You had a workable relationship. Is he a target? Should he be a target here?
Look, I don't know what happened to Clinton after he left the White House, but the depth of corruption in the Clinton Foundation is beyond imagine. I can't imagine them taking that habit of corruption into the White House.
If you point to one thing, what's the corruption in the Clinton Foundation?
How about all the people who got into the State Department who were giving money? How about the relationship between Clinton getting $1 million speech while the company that's involved is getting access to American uranium? How about in Haiti, all the special deals that were done for the Clinton family? You just go through and read it.
Yeah, it's there in black and white.
The inability of the elite media to render judgment on a corrupt couple who are dishonest and lying is breathtaking.
How far does that elite media go? I mean,
it's a culture.
Is the interpretation by the media of what happened in the debate on Monday night, is that just the elite media?
Well, the elite media Monday night had a whole series of embargoed stories eagerly waiting for Hillary Clinton to trigger an entire wave of media. Now, go back and look at it.
Well,
Molly Hemingway wrote this perfect article that said, here's exactly how it was set up, and here's exactly how the reporters were lined up, and here is the Cosmopolitan article with a picture involving the U.S. flag that was already shot. So this whole thing is a media ambush triggered by Hillary.
Okay, well, let me talk about, in terms of Monday night, in terms of the way the debate was reported. Because
you mean the Lester Holt interventions? You mean the way Lester sided on Hillary with Hillary?
That debate.
That debate, the one in which Lester and Hillary tag teamed against Trump.
The one that Fox News, where you work, its analyst said she won.
Okay.
She win that debate?
I think she is more glib than Donald Trump. I think strategically she lost the debate because I think she had to do one of two things. She had to either totally discredit him or she had to prove she had a vision of a better future. She has no vision of a better future. They wouldn't even try that. Okay. In the long run, he's going to survive the current smear campaign, and he'll rebound because the country wants change, and she can't offer change.
But not if he doesn't put his phone away.
It would be helpful for him to quit tweeting.
I've only got a minute left. We're not going to resolve the elite media question. But help me on this score. Tell me something about Donald Trump, because you know him, that would surprise not just me, but our audience. What would surprise me? I mean, people have got pretty set opinions about this guy right now.
I'll give you a couple quick examples in your minute left. He created Mar-a-Lago in Palm Beach. He fought the Palm Beach City Council in order to open up a club which was totally integrated. It was integrated for African Americans, Latinos, Jews, you name it, at a time that was not true of the other major clubs in Palm Beach. And he fought very hard for that. He promoted the first woman ever to build a high-rise building in New York, built it for Donald Trump. He took over the ice rink in Central Park when the city had spent millions of dollars over an 8-year period and failed totally. In 3 months, he came in under budget and fixed the ice rink by bringing in Canadians, by the way, who knew how to fix ice rinks.
Well, I guess.
Well, the city of New York had brought in some theoretician from Florida. I mean, you can't make this stuff up. So there are a lot of things Trump has done. I mean, his number one characteristic is he gets things done, just as he won the Republican nomination. I mean, this is not a guy who is going to take on a Yale debater who has been around, a lawyer, who's been literally campaigning for 46 years. It wasn't 30, it's 46 years.
But he should still keep debating? He should still do that final 2 debates?
Absolutely, he should debate. If he just sticks to his themes, he'll be fine.
Mr. Speaker, thank you very much.
It's great to be here.
Thank you.